Is your dry pantry getting out of hand like mine? I usually keep most of my dehydrated goods right here. Some are kept in our regular pantry for herbs and things like that we run through all the time. But most of it is kept here on this bookcase because it's the best place that I have to store. I don't have extra space in my home. We created this space so I could have some place to put it all as we use it. But you can see it's starting to get out of hand and I need to take care of this. So I'm going to go through an inventory, reorganize, and I want you to come along with me to find out how to take care of some of this stuff as you need to. Okay, so my first criteria is to go, do I have duplicates or do I have half jars that can be combined? Something I did notice that I have a greens half-gallon jar here and another greens half-gallon jar here. We go through a lot of green powder, but I also know that my green powder jar by the stovetop is kind of empty, so I need to know, do I need to keep both of these right now or can I take care of one of them? We're going to take care of one of them, put one back up on the shelf. Also, something that I look at is how old is the product that I have. Typically, dehydrated goods are good for about 2 years, sometimes 3. Heartier vegetables can last longer than fruits and things like tomatoes. Your mileage will vary. If you tell me that you've had something on the shelf for 20 years, go you, okay? But over time, a lot of dehydrated foods can start to lose their nutritional value in the texture and the quality of the food, so that when you rehydrate it, it may not be so great. And something I'm looking up at here, when I go through here, I'm noticing, try to take this out very gently without dropping anything, that my corn is starting to turn a little darker than it was even 6 months ago, which means that corn is starting to get a little old. So I need to figure out what I can do with all this corn. Don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but that's something else that I look for is the quality of the food and how it's storing. This may last quite a bit longer, but I'm thinking about maybe a corn chowder soup might be good with this, so I could rehydrate it and make soup with it. Although meals in a jar are coming pretty soon, so that's probably what most of this is going to go for. Then something else I'm looking at is, do I have a jar that is almost empty that needs to be rejarred because it needs to go back into a jar that's the appropriate size? Or am I about to dehydrate a whole bunch of this and it needs to stay in a jar like this because it's going to get refilled? That's something else that I look for when I'm going to do this. Another thing that I'm looking at is, can I refill some spice jars that I use now? I have all of this onion powder that I had created from my dried onions, which you can see right here, and I made too much to go into my spice jar, so this is probably going to just refill my spice jar. And I'm going to stick it right back up here. And this is doing something that you probably shouldn't do, is turning your jars on their side and doing this, because it's not really safe. You pull something out, one falls and breaks, you're in some trouble. Something else that I did when I set this up is to try to separate my vegetables from my fruit so it'd be a little easier to find the things that I need. I need to also make sure that in all of them there is a title or a label on each jar of what's actually in it. Now, you could label the outside of a jar if I wanted to, but I prefer just doing my labels. But right now, this is vegetable powder. This is trail mix. Those aren't the same thing. So while I can rename this if I want to, I can do that, but don't necessarily need to because I already see and I understand what's here. But if I had this on something that looks like vegetable powder but really isn't, that might be confusing. So you need to make sure that you're labeled on all the things. Something else I have in here, got extra space to rearrange. I have some of my pumpkin powder actually in a jar that doesn't fit my space. It's a cute jar, I love it, but it doesn't fit the space I need because it's taking up too much width and it needs to go up. We need to store vertically, not horizontally. So this needs to get rejarred. And I've got a shelf down here that you can't see right now of all of my cookbooks, my dehydrating books, my canning books, some of my personal recipe books. They're just going to have to go. That's where I always stored them. I'm going to have to find a new home for them because I'm going to need that extra space as we continue to dehydrate more to stock our pantry for our family. So I'm going to get started on this. Go get a cup of coffee, watch me organize, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with it all after. Okay, I'm going to start working on this one little project at a time. Here is our onion powder. I found that these ball candy jar lids aren't all that great for storage. No, Daddy, I'm just talking. It's okay. So I'm going to replace most of them with a regular lid. And instead of trying to store these beet capsules that I made, while we used them before, I made these right before I went to surgery and then haven't really done anything with them. They're going to go back into the supplement cabinet in order to be taken on a daily basis by my husband and I. Okay, I have a jar of salsa and a jar of picante sauce, which basically are the same thing, close enough that I can actually combine these two and use them interchangeably. These are a couple of jars of greens that I've got that I don't need to keep all the different ones. We're going to go ahead and powder them because it's how I use them most anyway. Kale, spinach, collard greens, turnip greens, mustard greens, whatever I can get on sale or on the clearance rack at our grocery store. It can be celery, it can be cucumber if I wanted to. It can be all sorts of anything that's got good green nutrients in it. That's what goes in my powder. Something else I do is I will actually use a brush and come in here and get out a little bit more of the green powder that gets kind of stuck on the blades and in my jar. Something else I do not do is I don't label this jar. We all know what it is. It's the big green jar that's right by the stove. This is for green powder. That's an old label from like 100 years ago. I don't know why it's still there. So no, I don't necessarily label everything because this stays by the stove. We know it's green powder. That's all that happens. Okay, I misspoke earlier that this is not actually pumpkin powder. It is sweet potato flour. And I haven't really used it since I made it because it's just not been on my radar because it's been kind of stuck in the back because I just stuck it back there. So we're going to make use of this. So I'm going to remedy this right now. I like to use sweet potato flour to make smashed sweet potatoes because my family doesn't like it, but I do. And my jar was not airtight because, oops, this lid, I don't know if you can see it. Something else that you need to check on, if you're using any of these kind of jars, make sure that that gasket that you have is actually supple. This one's hard, so it doesn't create an airtight seal the way it should. I could always pop this into the grinder and just regrind it if I wanted to as well, but it doesn't need it. Doing this too helps you start taking inventory of what you have, remembering things that you might have stuck on the back of the shelf, and helps you start meal planning a little better about, oh, I've got that, I can use that. Label your jars. Okay, something else I have is a couple of varieties of vegetable powders that I have in jars like this. You can mix all the vegetables. It does not matter. It's not going to hurt anything to do that for vegetable powder. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in a larger bin. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in a larger jar because I know that with the rest of what I'm doing, a lot of other things may get ground up to put into here. And I know I'm going to need that extra space. Something else I have are these asparagus bits. And I showed you not long ago how to dehydrate asparagus to use it for asparagus soup or other things that you wanted for. I'll leave the link for it right up here in the cards. But I already know this is not something that my family is going to eat. They do not like asparagus. So I'm going to go ahead and grind this for the vegetable powder. But I could put it in my green powder if I wanted to as well. But I'm going to go ahead and just stick it in with this. And yep, I'm reusing the jar. It's clean, it's fine. Be practical, okay? There's no sense in cleaning it up, just turn around and dirty it again when you're not. The stuff that's getting mixed doesn't matter. But if you made this and left it by itself, this would be really good in eggs. The next thing I have are strawberries. I've got doubles of it, so I'm gonna make a mess. Do this quick. I'm just gonna go ahead and add both together. Oh, that smells so good. We use the strawberries to go in our oatmeal in the mornings, and I use it sometimes to do bread. We use these strawberries to do oatmeal in the morning, and it's great. I love having this available, but there's no sense in having 2 sets when we don't need it. Here's what I'm really debating, because half of my family likes to have chunky things in their casseroles and stovetop meals and stuff. The other half do not like them at all, especially when they contain celery and onions or peppers. My family doesn't like that, but they like the flavor. They just don't like that texture. So what I think I'm going to do is the last of my mirepoix powder, that is carrots, onions, and celery, and the last of my Holy Trinity, which is onions, celery, and peppers. I'm going to go ahead and powder these for the flavor, because that will work well for how we cook. I can add that to anything that I'm cooking on the stovetop, but I don't have to have the chunks of things that my family really doesn't like to eat. I've got a couple who have some pretty big texture issues, and so this is going to be the way that I can use this without wasting. Am I going to use my same jar? You betcha. And for something like this, I don't try to get so powdered that you don't have any texture to it at all, because it's not important. It will rehydrate within the meal and be such a small piece, they're really not going to be noticeable. So there's your Holy Trinity right there. And because both of these have onion powder in them, they can clump. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little extra protection from clumping for both. Oops, wrong jar. This is just a moisture absorber, and it will help control some of the moisture that might happen. This is a moisture absorber, and what it does is help control the moisture that gets introduced into the jar every time you open it, and it will help this be less clumpy. All right, here is my clean out the jars stack of all the jars that I emptied out or combined, so that I have much more space now. But there's all that. All right, that only took about half an hour. I'm kind of hot and sweaty now after trying to get through all those jars pretty quickly, but I wanted to kind of walk you through what I've got. This top shelf is just big bulky stuff. Greens, peppers, we've got beans back there, we've got onions, zucchini, some hash browns that are left after 13 batches of it. We go through those. Mushrooms, some old elderberries that are probably too old at this point, but I'm not going to get rid of them just yet. I'm going to figure out what to do with them. I've had them for about 4 or 5 years, and we'll just figure out what to do with those. Then I said greens already. Oranges that I'm working through right now, and then that corn that I need to start taking care of when I do meals in a jar, that I need to put those in there. So there's that shelf. Then on this shelf, I've got some meals in a jar already prepped that I have here. Cabbage. This cabbage egg roll in a bowl has turned out to be a really big family favorite, so we're using this one. Then we've got a couple of other just soups back there, a taco soup, and I forgot what the other one is, but some kimchi that we dried that had gotten lost in the back and pulled back up front, so now we can use it. Then I have pumpkin powder, and in the back there I've got tomato chips that I use for doing cooking. They're right back there. Then here's some more peppers, and then these are small jars of mixes, French onion soup mix and tzatziki mix that I made up again because love this so much. Then some smaller jars of carrots and celery that are going to be good for meals in a jar, or if I want to put them in a stovetop meal, it'll work that way too. Then this is the Holy Trinity and the mirepoix that I powdered. It will stay up front because I can just pull this out quickly whenever I'm doing a meal. I don't have enough space in the little basket that I keep my necessary things in for when I'm cooking. But this will stay up front so I can see it all the time and add to it as I need to. These will get used up soon. But I also know I'm about to dehydrate a huge batch of cucumbers, so I'm probably going to make a bunch more tzatziki sauce mix because I love that stuff. And I'll leave that card right up here for it. Then on this shelf, it's mostly fruit. There's a couple of small single-serving meals in a jar for me because I'm kind of the only one that likes soup all the time. Then the rest of this is mostly just mostly just fruit. Strawberries, bananas, cranberries, some leftover candied oranges that we did at Christmas time. I kept some aside to have for snacks and for teas. Then these are apples. Then apple bits, and then right back here is fruit leather that nobody seems to like, so I'll figure out what to do with that. I'll probably just rehydrate it for like a fruit puree for dinner one night. Then a trail mix that we made a couple batches of this to test, and I love it, and I think it's so pretty. I don't want to eat it, but we got to eat it because it can't stay in here forever because it's got chocolate and nuts in it. They don't do well with dehydrated foods for long-term storage, so this is going to have to get eaten pretty soon. But it's like the jar was so pretty with all the layers, and I loved looking at it because that's something that happens with dehydrating, with canning even too, is that you put all this work into these very beautiful jars on the shelves and you love to look at them, and it makes your heart break to start using them because then it's like, but they're not the pretty things on your shelf anymore. You need to use them. That's the whole reason you put them up. Rotate through them, get them used up. So the last I have over here are some fruit powders that we keep, raspberry, strawberry, and blackberry, that I just keep over here in the corner that I pull out and use for yogurt or maybe putting in Cool Whip to top something. So it's like we just use those sporadically, but they're over here. So what I didn't have to do is get rid of the cookbooks. They're going to stay there for right now until we get a little further into the season. I'll have to make a shelf in the bedroom where I keep a lot of my books back there and move those there as I need the extra space. But the big important thing to remember is that when you store food, use it. Don't let it sit forever. Don't let it sit there and you're afraid to use it because you might need it someday. Use it, rotate it, put more on your shelf. So if you want to see how I made all this stuff, watch this video right here where I show you how to dehydrate from fresh to dry. And until I see you again next time, happy dehydrating, and remember, nevertheless, she preserved. See you again later.